The miracle doctor won't be a kept man, my heart belongs ashore. Chapter 751. Dad, it's my fault for not realizing how much you've suffered over the years. Now that your soul has returned to his homeland, can you rest in peace? If you have any unfulfilled wishes, please come to me in my dreams, and I will fulfill them for you. Rainfrost, crying out to the floating coffin, pleaded for it to settle down, but it remained stubbornly in the air, refusing to descend, leaving everyone in utter amazement. Commanding the heavens, the path is bright. The dragon soars across the seas. Please, Protector Frost, rest in peace. Members of Foxgate knelt in unison, loudly urging for a peaceful interment, but Blake Frost's coffin still refused to settle. The crowd was stunned, and many turned their gazes to Kiran York. Protector Frost, rest easy. Lillian Yang's voice rang out, clear and resonant, like an orchid in a deep valley. With Kiran here, the Imperial Dragon will surely regain its former glory. As her words fell, a loud clap of thunder echoed through the sky. Blake Frost's coffin stirred slightly, but still did not descend. Kiran knelt abruptly on the ground. Protector Frost, rest assured, as long as I live, I will enhance the Imperial Dragon and restore his former glory. Another thunderclap boomed overhead. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Blake Frost's coffin finally began to descend slowly. The already heavy rain turned into a downpour, obscuring everyone's vision. Many thought of Blake Frost's eyes that had remained open in indignation for over 20 years, waiting for such a promise that a single individual embodies the fate of the nation and the integrity of a steadfast spine. To the very end, Blake Frost was loyal to the Imperial Dragon, hoping for his strength, a true hero born for Dragon's Land. Even when the hero fell, his spirit remained undissipated, still concerned for his country and family. The people from the three major families of Bayville were moved by this realization, feeling ashamed of their past shamelessness. Father Larson directed everyone to seal the coffin. Blake Frost was finally laid to rest. The strange thing was that the rain over Dragon's Mount turned torrential while, outside Dragon's Mount, the sun shone brightly. It was as if the two locations were two different worlds. The already somber crowd felt even more oppressed by the rain. Many eyes were on Kiran, waiting for the final act, the placement of the Imperial Dragon sword in the sword shrine. However, the rain was so heavy that it blurred his vision, obscuring the direction to the sword shrine. As Kiran pondered his next move, the sound of a harp suddenly filled the air. Kiran remembered Lillian's reminder to bring a harp, which he had forgotten. Just as he was about to ask someone to fetch it, Lauren Jean, clad in a leather outfit, approached, water cascading off her like a shower. Despite the rain, she stood tall and handed Kiran the harp. Young Master York, gratefully nodding, Kiran took the harp and placed it on a nearby vehicle. He began to play along with the distant sound of Lillian's harp. As the first movement of the Joyful Odyssey played, images of unfamiliar but determined faces appeared before everyone's eyes, faces filled with pride and ambition. When the second movement echoed, visions of those same individuals fearlessly charging forward in battle filled the air. Tears flowed freely from everyone's eyes as the third movement played, depicting farewells between families, lovers, and friends. Parents were bidding farewell to their children, wives were bidding farewell to their husbands, lovers were bidding farewell to their lovers, and brothers were bidding farewell to each other. Sacrifices made for the greater good of Dragon's Land. No one could tell if it were tears or rainwater flowing down their faces. It was because of countless small families that the Dragon's Land is where it is today. As the fourth movement of the Joyful Odyssey concluded, it celebrated the solitude and pain of victory after the smoke of battle had cleared. Chapter 752. With the fifth movement, there was no longer any hatred. The heavy rain on Dragon's Mount suddenly ceased, revealing a clear sky bathed in radiant sunlight. The audience envisioned beautiful and peaceful scenes, filled with familial and romantic love. With a buzzing sound, Dragon's Mount seemed to emit a dragon's roar. From the direction of the sword shrine, a brilliant red light, tens of thousands of feet long, shone as if competing with the sun. As the music from the harp ceased, everyone remained immersed in the experience, as if awakening from a profound dream, a journey through life's ups and downs encapsulated in a single, powerful moment. The area fell silent. Kiran looked towards the sword shrine and smiled. The Imperial Dragon sword had found his resting place in Dragon's Mount, and with the Joyful Odyssey, he had bid farewell to Axel Yang's spirit, allowing him to finally find peace. In death, his spirit remained to guard the Imperial Dragon Sword and protect the Dragon Vein, touching the heavens and moving the earth. Kiran looked up, imagining Axel smiling down at him, filled with a mix of gratitude, and all heroes may go unnamed, but their spirits endure forever. Axel Yanks. The Joyful Odyssey spoke of worldly affections in its 7 movements. The first level was self-love, the second level was a dream, the third level was worldly love, the fourth level was grudges, the fifth level was no longer hatred, the sixth level was freedom, and the seventh level was immortality. Kiran knew only up to the fifth, but at this moment, he felt that Axel had transcended to a higher realm, becoming one with the ethereal. May you become truly free, Kiran murmured as he gazed at the sky. His harp and Lillian's in the distance sounded at the same time, seemingly acknowledging his blessing. The crowd, awakened from their reverie, looked towards Kiran as he spoke. "Thank you, everyone. Please, head back," Kiran said with a smile. The people nodded and glanced towards the sword shrine. Although they longed to see the sword, they knew that some heroes are honored best in the heart, not just in sight. Kiran turned away from the sword shrine and left. Lillian sat inside, gazing at the Imperial Dragon Sword, overwhelmed with emotions. Suddenly, she noticed something strange. The sword seemed to dissolve into Dragon's Mount itself. Stunned, she rushed to check but found nothing. Looking up at the sky, which was now clear and adorned with a rainbow, it seemed to say, "After the storm comes the rainbow." Far away in Maui's blood cavern, countless aggrieved souls burst forth and vanished. It was as if they had been purified, entering the cycle of reincarnation. Merciful Buddha, Master Azura, seated at the edge of the cavern, began to recite sutras vigorously, purifying the souls. Gu Mistress knelt beside him, chanting along with a sincere heart. The souls from the blood cavern were continuously freed, including those bound by the brain zombie Gu, purified and released from their earthly bonds. The flower girl was also attracted over, and Qasim Ali, who was controlled by brain zombie Gu, was also purified, his soul disappearing to leave his body and reincarnating. Merciful Buddha, Master Azura chanted as he looked at the flower girl. "Please inform Mr. Kiran that I will remain here indefinitely, ensuring peace for this place. I will stay as well to protect Maui," Gu Mistress added. The flower girl nodded and left the cavern, heading to Bayville to meet with Kiran. At that moment, Kiran had reached the Bayville Hospital, where a sign for the York Traditional Medicine Clinic hung proudly. He looked up at the signboard and smiled. "Heal the people, heal the nation." Guarding the nation with a heart devoted to his country. Meanwhile, Konta Yasuda met with Okajima to discuss how to deal with Kiran York. Chapter 753. Mr. Okajima, now that Kiran has become even more powerful in Bayville, and he's taken over Dragon's Mount, which we bought, what do we do? Konta Yasuda asked. Okajima's face was extremely grim, his expression changing several times before he looked at Yasuda. The Ninja Association has suffered heavy losses, and nobody has the strength to confront him now. Under the current circumstances, we can only endure. Endure. Yasuda was surprised that Okajima would suggest they just endure. "Do you have any other ideas? Who could kill Kiran?" Okajima had heard about Yasuda's failed attempt to discuss Kiran with those women at the funeral. "I have no other choice, so I came to ask Mr. Okajima." Although Okajima disliked Yasuda's questioning, considering his financial backing, he replied more softly, "Then let's wait. When our Sunland's #1 warrior, Campo Ichiro, finishes his seclusion, we can have him challenge Kiran." Hearing the suggestion to invite Kampe Ichiro, Yasuda was overjoyed. "Mr. Okajima, that's a wise decision." A sinister smile appeared on Okajima's face as he said coldly, "It will take some time for Kampe Ichiro to come out of seclusion. If you want to take revenge on Kiran during this period, you might consider appropriate methods." "Appropriate methods?" Yasuda asked eagerly. Okajima didn't say more but made a throat-slitting gesture. Yasuda immediately understood Okajima's implication for assassination. "Rest assured, Mr. Okajima, I will not disappoint you." Okajima nodded, his face showing anticipation. After Yasuda left, he immediately hired assassins to kill Kiran. Soon, someone accepted the task and headed for Dragon's Land. Kiran was unaware of Yasuda and Okajima's relentless schemes, as he had handed over the venture capital business entirely to Serena Zimmerman and Lindsay Ludwig. Lindsay stayed in Bayville, However, Yvonne Quinn went back to Dragon City, returning to what she called home, the Ludwig family. Kiran started his daily routine of treating patients at the York Traditional Medicine Clinic. The healing elder and Frank Dean were assisting Kiran, so there was no shortage of help. After Kiran had treated the last patient and was about to take a break, he suddenly heard the sound of a sports car. He looked toward the sound and saw Sofia Carter arriving. Recalling the last funeral where this woman took away those women and then vanished, he stood up and approached her, initiating conversation with, "Thanks for last time." Surprised that Kiran would thank her, Sofia smiled and asked, "Is that all?" "A simple thank you. What else would you like as thanks?" Considering this woman's heroic spirit, Kiran was somewhat intrigued and teasing. "Why don't you treat me medically?" "Treat you?" Kiran glanced at Sofia. "You look healthy. You're not sick." "I am sick." Sofia lightly flipped her hair as she spoke. "What illness?" "Love sickness." Kiran touched his nose and turned to leave. "Cut it out. I'm not pining over you," Sofia called out to his back, her face full of disdain. Kiran stopped. "Who caught your eye then?" "That's none of your business. Actually, I have a favor to ask." "Go ahead." "I'm studying traditional medicine and about to graduate from college. I need a place to intern. How about here? My clinic is a small operation. I can't afford to hire. We come for free." "You all?" Kiran was curious. "Our whole class." Sofia paused. "If that's not enough, our entire year can intern here." Kiran immediately shook his head. "I only need 2 interns here, and I already have one, Aurora Sinfield. There's just 1 spot left. Is it that scarce?" Kiran nodded. "I have enough staff here. Then I'll come." "You?" Kiran was clearly skeptical, implying he didn't see the pampered heiress as a good fit. "Don't worry. I can do anything." Sofia glanced at Kiran. "Even get into bed if necessary." "Forget about bed. My wife is very beautiful." Kiran refused with a smile. "You're not rejecting me. You're just trying to distance yourself, right?" Sofia asked sharply. Kiran paused but internally admired the woman's acumen. He had just been testing Sofia during their conversation. She carried the pride of a major family but also a stubborn streak common among ordinary folks. "You don't need to test me anymore. I'm from the Carter family in Dragon City. Miles Carter is my cousin, and Mr. Carter is my grandfather. I know all about what happened in Falks." Removing her sunglasses, Sofia revealed her strikingly beautiful face, youthful and radiant, exuding the confidence and allure typical of a young woman. "I didn't come here for revenge on behalf of Miles Carter or to help the Carter family. I came to change my destiny," Sofia said earnestly. "Change your destiny?" Kiran was genuinely curious. "Yes, change my destiny," she confirmed and then elaborated. "In our family, marriage is just a transaction. I don't want to be a part of that. I want to learn medicine, hopefully become a miracle doctor, and if I'm truly successful one day, I won't have to be forced into marriage." Kiran hadn't expected this kind of heroic character from Sofia to speak of her marriage with such a sense of justice. "Do you think you can change your destiny?" "Without trying, I'll never change it." Sofia locked eyes with him. "Meeting you, I think I can." "Using me, I helped you that day with the women." "Yes, fair enough. I want you to take me as your disciple," Sofia quickly added. "To take you as a disciple." Kiran hadn't expected this request. "I want to disciple under you so I can learn skills, and maybe you could protect me from a forced marriage in the future." Kiran chuckled. "It seems you've already decided I'll help you." "Not exactly." "So, you have schemes too. In a major family, how can a woman survive without schemes? Life is just that cruel." Sofia looked towards the York Traditional Medicine Clinic. "Kiran, with your fame and skills, you wouldn't refuse to take on a female disciple, would you?" "I actually don't want to take any." Kiran looked at her seriously. "Not wanting to take any means you've already taken one, right?" Sofia was already excitedly unbuckling her seatbelt to get out of her car. Kiran was about to agree when suddenly, smack, Sofia kissed Kiran on the cheek. Kiran froze, caught off guard by her forwardness. The next second, his eyes widened in shock. Snow Xander was just getting out of the car and had seen everything. Chapter 754. Following Kiran's gaze, Sofia Carter spotted Snow Xander, clad in a red cheongsam, flesh-colored stockings, and white crystal stilettos, standing beside a red Ferrari. Snow exuded an alluring, seductive beauty. Sofia felt a tremor in her heart. Snow was indeed stunning. However, Considering her own beauty, Sofia wasn't willing to concede just yet. She encouraged herself. I'm still young, I can be even prettier. After mentally bolstering herself, Sofia quickly gathered her courage and approached Snow, calling out, "Hello, madam." Initially displeased when seeing Sofia kiss Kiran, Snow was taken aback when addressed as madam. She quickly turned to Kiran. Kiran shrugged, smiling. Sofia is from the Carter family. She wishes to become my apprentice. From the Carter family. Snow's expression grew wary, seemingly questioning why Kiran would agree. Kiran simply smiled peacefully. I've decided to accept her as my disciple. Seeing that Kiran was serious, Snow didn't probe further. Instead, she smiled, removed a bracelet from her wrist, and handed it to Sofia, saying, "Study well in the future." "Thank you, madam." Sofia took the bracelet and carefully placed it around her fair wrist, giving Kiran a playful shake of her hand. "Madam is great. Gifts right upon meeting." Kiran watched the slender, fair wrist now adorned with the golden bracelet, finding it strikingly beautiful. Yet, his thoughts were more on Snow's cleverness of bracelet as a subtle reminder to Sofia to always remember that Kiran is married. Smart women meant a man had to worry less. Kiran nodded with a smile and said, "Now go and study well. Come to me if you have any questions." Sofia nodded eagerly. All right. She parked her car and then entered the York Traditional Medicine Clinic. Sofia was aware of Snow's intentions, but she pretended not to know. Being close to Kiran was beneficial enough. As for love, that could develop over time after all. Rome wasn't built in a day. Kiran approached Snow and asked softly, "What brings you here all of a sudden?" "To keep an eye on you." Snow burst out laughing after saying it. "Although there's no need to supervise really. Just be cautious with women." "Let's go," Kiran said with a wry smile, taking Snow's hand. They drove away from the clinic. The scenery around Dragon's Mount was beautiful, giving a sense of cruising through the landscape. Snow relaxed and then turned to Kiran, asking, "Honey, do you think I might be pregnant?" Kiran shook his head. "I really wouldn't know." "How can you not care?" Snow pouted playfully, half wishing for Kiran to try again. Before being with Kiran, she hadn't cared much about such matters. But now, being with him, such thoughts often came to mind. Yet, as a woman, she felt too embarrassed to say it outright. So she used the possibility of pregnancy as an excuse to broach the subject. Kiran understood well enough. He didn't say much but gently held her hand as comfort. They drove down from Dragon's Mount and went directly to Bayville Square. "What are we doing here?" Snow was curious. "Taking my wife shopping," Kiran declared, full of affection. "Fantastic." Snow momentarily behaved like a delighted young girl, hugging Kiran's arm and leaning close to him. The couple entered a shopping mall. Snow's red cheongsam stood out dramatically, adding to her already captivating allure. Together, with Kiran's youthful handsomeness, they drew many admiring glances. Kiran led her into a jewelry store. Snow knew it was because she had given the bracelet to Sofia, so he probably wanted to compensate her with another, which made her happy. They entered the Tay jewelry store together. Kiran's attention was all on Snow, not noticing a woman nearby who kept glancing at them, her hand constantly inside her bag as if clutching something precious. "Sir, madam, are you looking to choose a wedding ring?" Seeing Kiran and Snow's handsome and beautiful appearance, the clerk asked politely. Snow instinctively looked at her hand. It was ringless. Kiran, however, smiled and held her hand. "How about this ring? It's too big. I can't even move my hand," Snow joked. They laughed together, the affection obvious. Seeing that Kiran was not interested in buying a ring, the clerk's enthusiasm deflated somewhat, but he still asked courteously, "What are you planning to buy?" "A bracelet," Kiran replied. "We have bracelets ranging from a few hundred to several $1,000s, the clerk said, turning to Snow. "With this lady's elegance and beauty, I think the most expensive bracelet would be the most suitable." Kiran wasn't bothered by the clerk's aggressive sales technique, calmly saying, "Wifey, you choose. Aren't you going to help me decide?" Snow playfully scolded. "I'll make sure it's genuine," Kiran quipped. "Sir, all the jewelry sold at Tay is authentic," the clerk said with a slightly displeased look. "I know." Snow was aware of Tay Jewelry's reputation for integrity. Kiran, however, was slightly annoyed and pointed to a necklace. "Is this necklace real?" "What do you mean? Are you suggesting our jewelry is fake?" The clerk raised his voice immediately. "What's going on?" A woman wearing a manager's badge approached, her demeanor clearly upset. Manager Morris, this man is accusing us of selling fakes. The clerk complained angrily. Sir, this is Bayville Square. This is Tejuri. Please be mindful of what you say. Manager Morris spoke sharply, her tone full of irritation. Snow didn't understand Karen's intention and quickly pulled him aside to remind him. Taste quality is guaranteed. All their products are authentic. Don't talk nonsense. This necklace is actually a counterfeit. Karen pointed to one of the necklaces and insisted. Sir, you are slandering us. I'm calling the police and having security detain you. The manager said angrily as she pulled out her phone. With a swift whoosh, Karen sprang forward as if intent on snatching the phone from the manager. Snow, taken aback by Karen's sudden move, watched in confusion. Amidst this, a scream pierced the air. Snow spun around. The manager was still on the phone, apparently untouched. When Snow turned back, Karen was nowhere beside her. She scanned the area and spotted him near a seductively dressed woman. Karen, with a teasing look, had swiftly drawn the woman's hand from her bag, revealing a black handgun for everyone to see. Chapter 755. Gun. A bystander, seeing the woman holding a gun, shouted, Who is she? Snow quickly approached Karen and asked. Karen scanned the surroundings, confirming there was no immediate danger, and then focused on the woman, asking calmly, Who sent you to kill me? The woman glared at Karen with a sharp, icy stare, silent but filled with venom as if he were an age-old enemy. If you won't talk, then we'll just wait for the police to take you away. After all, you are armed. You're facing no small charge, Karen noted. You sly Karen, if it weren't for your cunning, I would have killed you. The woman exclaimed with indignation, clearly resentful as she realized she was about to be apprehended by the police. Karen remained composed and responded, Is your intelligence so low that you didn't notice I was deliberately annoying the manager to distract your focus? Roman I. The woman was frustrated, realizing she had been caught precisely because her attention had been diverted. So you refused to speak? Karen asked, before lightly slapping her on the cheek. The woman cried out in pain, but now she was free to move. She scrambled up, attempting to retrieve her gun from the ground, only to find Karen stepping on it. She looked disappointed but realized she couldn't linger, so she turned and fled. Karen watched her run but chose not to pursue. Snow, curious, looked at Karen for explanations. Karen turned to the visibly shocked manager, Manager Morris. That bracelet is indeed a fake. I'm not sure if it's because of your suppliers, but you might want to look into it. You're saying it's a fake. Manager Morris was taken aback. She did not believe him at first, but having seen Karen's actions and knowing someone had tried to shoot him, she couldn't help but respect his capabilities. It is fake. If you don't believe me, you can have it checked by the police, Karen suggested. SSS. Manager Morris gasped and eyed the bracelet closely. You're lying. How could Tejuri sell fakes? A saleswoman challenged Karen aggressively. Karen simply replied, Whether it's fake or not can be verified by the police. Manager Morris, you should have this man arrested. I suspect that woman was hired to stage a scene just to defame our store. The saleswoman ranted loudly. Manager Morris's expression changed from trust to suspicion as her confidence in Karen waned. Manager Morris, nowadays people do anything for internet views. I suspect they might be recording this to create a sensational video, the saleswoman added loudly. Now even more doubtful, Manager Morris looked at Karen coldly. Sir, I think it would be best if you explained this to the police. You think I'm doing this for internet views? Karen asked, smiling. Isn't that the case? The saleswoman accused loudly, with Manager Morris nodding in agreement. Why wear a bracelet on the arm? Karen suddenly lifted the saleswoman's sleeve before she could react. Gasps filled the room as everyone saw another bracelet hidden up near her armpit, identical to the one in the display case. She was very thin, so the bracelet could be worn higher up her arm. Hiss. The crowd was visibly shocked. Manager Morris's face turned ashen. She glared between the bracelet on the saleswoman's arm and the display case, then coldly demanded, Becky, what is this about? Roman I. What? Becky stuttered, unable to explain. Why do we have two identical bracelets when each item in our store is supposed to be unique? Manager Morris pressed. Becky turned pale, struggling for words. Swapping a cheap bracelet for a few $100 not a bad scheme, Karen observed, looking at Becky. Rich customers know quality and can spot fakes. But ordinary people, they treasure it too much to even question it. Such items sell fast, and complaints are rare. They're easy to dismiss even if there are any. Your psychological grasp of the consumer is very accurate. Kiran dissected Becky's motives and methods like a modern-day Sherlock Holmes, exposing her scheme in full view of everyone as if narrating her own thoughts. At that moment, security and police arrived, asking loudly, "Whose gun? Who's making false accusations? Where's the person?" Everyone's eyes turned to Becky, who, in panic, collapsed to the floor, terrified of being arrested. "Take her away," Manager Morris ordered sternly. "Manager Morris, please, I beg you. It's my first time. I'll never do it again," Becky pleaded, kneeling. "One time is enough to end us." Manager Morris responded without mercy. "Manager Morris, my child is sick. I had no choice. Please." Becky continued to plead desperately. She kowtowed to Manager Morris, desperately knocking her forehead on the floor. Hearing about her child, Manager Morris paused momentarily, her expression softening slightly. "Is this really the first time?" she asked, wiping away tears. Becky nodded earnestly. "Manager Morris, it really is the first time. I barely managed to scrape together the surgery fees for my child when the doctor demanded a bribe. I had no money left, so I resorted to this. Please, just this once, forgive me." Manager Morris's face showed a tumult of emotions as she looked towards the police and security, then back at Becky. "We just had a woman try to kill someone in our store, all thwarted by this gentleman here," she explained, gesturing towards Kiran. She then turned to Kiran with a look of plea, hoping he might support a lenient approach for Becky. Kiran, who had observed the desperation and sincerity in Becky's actions, nodded slightly to the police. "The would-be assassin has fled. I disarmed her," he informed them calmly. "Able to disarm her? Really?" a security guard asked, skeptical. "Why not?" a policeman snapped back, pushing the guard aside and respectfully turning to Kiran. "Young Master York, thank you." This policeman had been on duty in Dragon's Mount and had seen Kiran's actions during the funeral rites, filling him with admiration. Kiran simply shook his head modestly. "No trouble at all. Just make sure to take the gun." "Of course, young Master York," the policeman responded with deference, leading his team to exit the scene. The crowd watched, some knowing of Kiran's reputation and showing admiration, others curious about the man who had just ordered a potentially deadly situation with calm and authority. Kiran's gaze returned to Becky, who looked fearful of her impending fate. Chapter 756. Kiran York smiled at Becky. "How old is your child? What illness does he have? Which hospital is he staying in?" His barrage of questions stunned Becky, not expecting Kiran to show concern for her child. Having not felt sympathy or concern in a long time, Becky was suddenly overwhelmed with sadness and broke down crying. "My child is only 5 years old, suffering from a heart condition. He's hospitalized at Bayville Hospital. The surgery cost $500,000, and after selling our house, the doctors demanded an additional $30,000 as a bribe." "Boo-hoo," Becky cried uncontrollably, covering her face, her body weakening as she slowly slumped to the ground, crying inconsolably. Manager Morris stepped forward and patted Becky on the shoulder. "If you're facing difficulties, you should talk to us. We can all help you." Becky's crying intensified, and she nodded repeatedly. Manager Morris, Snow Xander said, "I'll buy both bracelets." Manager Morris was stunned and looked at Snow incredulously. "One of them is fake." Snow nodded with a smile, charged as if both are genuine. "Give me the fake one." Manager Morris was shocked but complied, handing the fake gold bracelet to Snow. Snow wore it on her arm and flaunted it to Kiran. "Does it look pretty?" Kiran admired Snow's kindness and nodded in praise. "It's very beautiful." Becky had already taken the bracelet off her arm and handed it to Snow. "Madam, this is yours." "I'm giving it to you," Snow said with a smile, helping Becky wear it on her wrist. Becky was stunned. "Wear it and remind yourself to be honest," Snow continued. "You are an example to your child. His strength." I. Becky was moved to tears again. Snow gently shook her bracelet. "Wearing this fake bracelet, I can remind myself that a company's long-term development requires integrity." Snow took Becky's hand and said, "Both our bracelets hold special value and meaning. How perfect is that?" Becky nodded tearfully, deeply touched by Snow's understanding and grateful for her tolerance. Kiran stepped forward and looked at Becky. "Take me to see your child." "You?" Becky was startled. "My husband is a doctor at the York Traditional Medicine Clinic," Snow said as she clung to Kiran's arm, looking at Becky. "When my grandfather was ill, the chief of cardiology at Bayville Hospital, Dr. Adrian Lane, had given up on him. But it was my husband who saved him." "Really?" Becky was shocked and wide-eyed. Seeking confirmation, Dr. Adrian Lane couldn't save him. She had wanted Dr. Lane's help but hadn't even been able to meet him. "Trusting young Master York is never wrong," someone in the crowd reminded. "Yes, young Master York is a descendant of Bayville's foremost York family. He wouldn't deceive you. Young Master York is excellent in both medicine and martial arts. He can surely heal your child. You're really lucky to have met young Master York today." People who knew Kiran spoke up. Becky felt like she was dreaming, her heart racing as she looked up at Kiran, handsome and composed, exuding a charismatic aura. Standing together with Snow, they truly were a match of equal talents and beauty. Thinking of Snow's kindness and forgiveness, Becky believed in Kiran wholeheartedly. With a thud, Becky knelt before Kiran, tearfully pleading, "Young Master York, please, get up." Kiran helped her to her feet. "Let's go now, no time to waste." Kiran then strode out, with Becky hurrying after him. Snow's eyes were filled with happiness and sweetness. Kiran was not only her husband, but also a man of great heart and charisma. Such a husband made her blissfully happy. Half an hour later, the trio arrived at the cardiology department of Bayville Hospital. Outside the ward, they saw a man squatting on the ground, sobbing with his head in his hands. Inside the ward, the scene was hectic. Medical staff were busily moving in and out, and many onlookers tried to peer inside. Becky's legs gave way when she saw the man, but Kiran caught her, preventing her from falling. "Leslie, how is our son?" Becky tried to control her emotions as she called out. The man, hearing Becky's call, burst into tears, tried to get up, but blacked out and collapsed. "Leslie," Becky rushed to his side. "Who is the family of the child? The child is not going to make it. Prepare for the worst." A grim-faced male doctor came out of the ward. Becky collapsed to the ground, her face ashen. Kiran strode towards the ward. "Stop. Who are you?" The male doctor blocked Kiran. "Get out of my way." Kiran rebuked him, infuriated by the thought of these people wanting bribes to treat the sick. "Bring Dr. Adrian Lane to me." "Who the hell are you?" The doctor shouted angrily, seeing Kiran's assertiveness. He reached out to grab him, but Kiran sidestepped him. The doctor missed and stumbled, crashing into the wall. "Ow!" The doctor cried out in pain. "Who are you?" The medical staff inside saw Kiran and rushed to stop him. A nurse ran over, helping the doctor up while seizing the opportunity to ingratiate herself. "Dr. Duncan, are you all right? Quick, call security. Get this guy arrested." "Right away." The nurse turned and ran out. Kiran entered the ward and saw a child, gaunt and ashen, lying on the bed, no longer breathing, his face contorted in pain. Kiran's heart ached. This was congenital heart disease, terribly managed by these blood-sucking incompetents. He suppressed his anger and inserted his silver needles into the child's body. "What are you doing to a dead child?" Dr. Duncan burst in, waving his hands and trying to push Kiran away. Quack! Thump! Kiran kicked Dr. Duncan out, knocking over others in the process. He locked the door and began manipulating his silver needles to treat the child. As his vital energy flowed into the child, color slowly returned to his body. Unable to open the door, Dr. Duncan banged on the door and shouted from outside. A nurse returned with security, saying, "It's this ward." Seeing the guards, Dr. Duncan perked up. "That lunatic is inside. Break down the door. Get him out." "All right." The guards agreed and rushed at the door, swinging their rubber batons. "Stop." Just then, Dr. Adrian Lane arrived and shouted. Dr. Duncan saw him as a lifeline. "Director Lane, you have to back me up." Chapter 757. Adrian Lane's gaze first fell on Snow Xander. He ignored Dr. Duncan and quickly approached her. "Director Xander, what are you doing here?" "I came with my husband to treat and save someone," Snow replied, glancing at Duncan with evident dissatisfaction. "People are already dead. What's there to save?" Annoyed by Snow's disdain, Duncan retorted, "Is Dr. Kiran inside saving someone?" Adrian Lane was genuinely shocked. Snow nodded. Kiran is inside. That's great, Adrian Lane said joyfully. Duncan, somewhat baffled but still very irritated, looked at Adrian Lane and said, Director Lane, the person is already dead. What's there to save? Besides, he just hits people. Why is that allowed? Shut up, Adrian Lane snapped, clearly annoyed by Duncan's constant complaints. Duncan, unwilling to give up, angrily looked towards the ward, his eyes filled with resentment. The door to the hospital room creaked open, and Kiran emerged, his forehead covered in sweat. Snow quickly went up to support him. Dr. Kiran, how is my son? Becky rushed over to ask. Before Kiran could reply, Duncan interjected. What do you expect? He's dead. The nurse who had called security had sneaked in unnoticed. Seeing that the monitors showed no changes and the child lying motionless, she assumed he was dead and burst out excitedly. He's dead? He's dead. What? Becky gasped, her vision darkening as she collapsed on the floor. Her husband, who had just regained some strength from his faint, quickly caught her. My son, Becky cried out in agony. Duncan laughed with satisfaction, looking at Kiran. What kind of miracle doctor are you? The person is still dead, right? Adrian Lane was uncertain about the situation and looked at Kiran. Kiran just looked back at Adrian Lane. Adrian Lane felt like he was looking at two burning flames, making him tremble. Is this the kind of doctor you manage? Kiran asked coldly. Adrian Lane, sweating profusely, stuttered. What? You claim to be a miracle doctor, yet you couldn't revive him, could you? Duncan sneered mockingly. Pretending to be all that, and yet you also hit people. Duncan fumed, looking at the nurse beside him. Call the police right now. Right away. The nurse agreed immediately. Looking at Kiran, you just wait to be arrested. Duncan turned to Becky and her husband. This man has been messing with your dead child. You should sue him and make him pay. Becky and her husband looked conflicted but eventually shook their heads. Dr. Kiran helped us. We are grateful. Duncan, even more infuriated and full of confidence, said, you should make him pay. You can use the money from your dead child to pay off your debts. Duncan kept sarcastically talking about money. Kiran didn't say anything but just looked at Becky and her husband. Becky shook her head, wiping her tears. Even if he couldn't save him, Dr. Kiran did his best. It was my child's fate. She looked at Kiran. Thank you, Dr. Kiran. Duncan was provoked. What kind of miracle doctor? He's just a fraud. He is just... Suddenly the crying of a child interrupted Duncan. Everyone was too stunned to react. The child is crying. Becky's husband was the first to react, rushing into the room. Mommy. The child had jumped to the ground and ran out, meeting his father at the doorway. Daddy. The child hugged his father, crying loudly. Tao Tao. The man embraced his child as if he had been reborn. Becky was already kneeling on the ground, bowing to Kiran and crying uncontrollably, filled with gratitude. Dr. Kiran. The medical staff on site were stunned. Wasn't the child dead? Duncan rubbed his eyes, looking at the child. Impossible. No. Impossible your sister, huh? Slap. Slap. Adrian Lane rushed over and slapped Duncan twice. Duncan screamed in pain, doubting Dr. Kiran's medical skills. Adrian Lane grew angrier as he spoke, slapping Duncan again. Duncan was left miserably battered. Adrian Lane quickly approached Kiran. Dr. Kiran, I'm sorry. It's all because of my poor management. Kiran didn't even acknowledge Adrian Lane. He was very disappointed with the cardiology department of Bayville Hospital. Where's the fraudster? Just then, a police officer's questioning voice came from outside the crowd. He is the fraudster. Duncan, still feeling aggrieved and humiliated, pointed at Kiran. The police officer arrived just in time to meet Kiran's gaze. It was quite coincidental they were the same policemen at Tay Jewelry Store in Bayville Square earlier. However, the police did not greet Kiran. Instead, they looked at Duncan and said, how do you know he's a fraudster? Duncan, recalling he had never heard of a Bayville miracle doctor named Kiran. If there had been one, it would be impossible not to know, rolled his eyes and said, he treated people without a medical license. That's illegal. Feeling his reasoning was solid, Duncan arrogantly looked at Kiran. Do you have a medical license? Show it to me. If you don't have a medical license, that's illegal practice, and you're a fraudster, you will be arrested. The nurse also suddenly realized this, stepping forward with a haughty look at Kiran. Show me your medical license. Kiran remained silent, only giving Duncan a pitiful look. Feeling mocked and despised, Duncan couldn't help but angrily say, "Well, show your medical license then." "Show what?" "Damn it." Adrian Lane couldn't stand it any longer, berating Duncan. "Director Lane, he definitely doesn't have a medical license. He's a fraudster." Click. The police had already approached and handcuffed Duncan. "What are you doing?" Duncan was stunned. "We suspect you of slander," the police coldly replied. "Slander?" Confusion filled Duncan's eyes. "Mr. Kiran is the owner of Babel's Kiran Traditional Medicine Hall. If he's not a doctor, then what is he?" The police looked at Duncan as if he were a fool. He is the owner of Kiran Traditional Medicine Hall," Duncan murmured as if awakening from a dream. "Of course." Adrian Lane angrily glared at Duncan. "Duncan, before this, you were here when Dr. Kiran miraculously treated the chairman of the booming group, Marshall Simmons' father." "Ah." Duncan's body trembled violently as if struck by lightning. These were legends and myths. Was this the fraudster he had been denouncing? He was just a blind fool, a pathetic clown. His mind was bewildered, then chaotic, followed by a nervous fear. Thump. Duncan knelt before Kiran. "Dr. Kiran, I'm sorry. I was blind. Please forgive me." All eyes turned to Kiran. "Do you want me to forgive you?" Kiran asked. Yes. Duncan hastily replied. "Do you know where you went wrong?" Kiran's voice turned cold. Chapter 758. His eyes shifted nervously. Dr. Duncan quickly began to blame himself. "I shouldn't have obstructed Dr. York's treatment and rescue efforts. I shouldn't have doubted Dr. York's medical skills. I shouldn't have slandered Dr. York as a fraudster." With that, Duncan slapped himself twice, tears squeezing out of his eyes as he looked at Kiran York pitifully and anxiously, hoping for forgiveness. However, Kiran was indifferent and coldly smiled as he watched Duncan. Anything else? Duncan's head buzzed. Was his apology not enough? And was his admission of wrongdoing insufficient? His eyes shifted. "I was blind to talent. I didn't recognize a great man. I didn't know about Dr. York's miracles." He paused again, looking towards Kiran, waiting for forgiveness. "Anything else?" Kiran continued to ask. Duncan opened his mouth but was speechless. To be precise, he didn't know what else to say. The others at the scene also felt something was amiss and looked towards Kiran. "Anything else?" Kiran persisted. Duncan shook his head. "No, nothing more." "Nothing more, is it?" Kiran scoffed, anger flashing in his eyes. Snow Xander tried to hold Kiran back, but he shrugged off her hand and walked up to Duncan. "Nothing more, is it?" Duncan shook his head, sensing Kiran's rage as if he was about to strike, but thinking of the police, he felt a bit emboldened. "Hey!" Kiran had already grabbed him and pulled him up, angrily demanding, "Anything else?" Duncan felt like prey under the gaze of a fierce beast, his whole body cold and trembling, but he kept shaking his head. "No, nothing more." Slap. Kiran slapped him. "Really, nothing more." Puff. Duncan spat out a mouthful of blood. "Ow. Police? He's hitting me. Arrest him quickly." Duncan cried out pitifully. The police and others were stunned. Kiran was furious. "You have no medical ethics." Slap. Kiran slapped him again. "Ah." Duncan screamed. "You prescribe drugs recklessly to patients." Slap. Kiran slapped him again. Whimpering, Duncan started crying. "You force families of patients to give red envelopes." Slap. Slap. Kiran slapped him twice more. "Tooey tooey." Duncan spat out blood mixed with white teeth. His face was swollen beyond recognition. "Police, Kiran is violently assaulting me. Arrest him quickly." Duncan shouted, weak and humiliated. "Was he hitting you?" the leading police officer asked, looking around as if he hadn't seen anything. Thinking about the humiliation they suffered during their treatments and the red envelopes they had given, everyone shook their heads. "Didn't see it. He hit me? Look at my face." Duncan cried out. Slap. Slap. Kiran slapped him twice more. "You have no medical ethics." Ah. Duncan was in pain. "We didn't see it," the crowd shouted, feeling very relieved. Duncan's heart sank completely. He was universally despised. However, he was not willing to give up. Looking towards Adrian Lane with effort, his swollen eyes barely open. "Director Lane, you have to testify for me." At this moment, Adrian Lane was full of anger and annoyance, not because of Kiran but because of the issues Kiran raised, which made him feel ashamed. "Duncan, have you been indiscriminately medicating and collecting red envelopes?" I haven't," Duncan insisted. Before Duncan could finish speaking, Others started shouting at him, exposing his lies. Yesterday, I gave you a 5,000 red envelope. Today, I gave you 3,000. I have the recording here. You asked me to give you 10,000 tomorrow. Duncan's head was buzzing. Police, I have evidence. Someone already pulled out their phone. Duncan cried out in his heart, knowing he was doomed. Take him away. The lead police officer couldn't stand it anymore and shouted angrily. No, please. Duncan cried out for help. Go to the police station and explain there. The police came forward and dragged Duncan away like a dead dog. His heart completely chilled, knowing his doom was sealed. Spit. Serves him right. Such a scoundrel should have been cleaned up long ago. Thank you, Dr. York, for helping us uphold justice. The crowd watched Duncan's retreating back, each speaking out. Tui tui. Duncan heard them. He spat out 2 more mouthfuls of blood and fainted in despair. Adrian Lane felt a mix of self-reproach and shame. He approached Kiran York. Dr. York, I'm sorry. It's all due to my lax management. You should clear things up yourself if you've done anything similar. Kiran responded coldly. I swear to heaven, I've never done such things, Adrian quickly said. That's your business? Kiran replied dismissively. Dr. York, will my son still need treatment? Becky's husband approached, holding their child. Kiran had a good impression of this family by now. He looked at the man. Why is your body so weak? Roman I. What? Becky's husband stammered, unable to speak. My husband delivers takeouts by day and works as a driver by night, earning money like crazy, all to save our child, Becky explained through tears. Kiran's anger flared even more, blaming the incompetence of some doctors for their suffering. Adrian thought of Duncan's shamelessness and hung his head in shame. Many around them wiped away tears. Getting sick and seeking treatment was already hard enough without encountering unethical doctors. Kiran turned to Becky and her husband. Come work at York Traditional Medicine Hall. I'll pay each of you 10,000 a month, with bonuses and overtime separate. Your child's ongoing treatment will be free. What? Those present gasped in envy. Becky and her husband felt as if they were dreaming. After a moment, Becky burst into tears, covered her face, and sat down. If not for Kiran, she might have been in jail. If not for Kiran, their child might have died. Kiran repaid evil with kindness. Becky's husband tried to kneel before Kiran, but Kiran prevented him. Kiran addressed the other patients. If you believe in traditional medicine, you can come to York Traditional Medicine Hall for treatment. I'm going, someone already shouted eagerly. Me too. I'll never trust this deceptive Bevo hospital again. After the crowd finished speaking, they all began to process their discharges. Adrian and the other medical staff stood there red-faced and ashamed, wishing they could disappear into the ground. Kiran left with Becky's family and child. Outside, Kiran called Frank Dean, asking him to meet with Becky's family. Kiran and Snow Xander got into the car. Snow looked excitedly at Kiran with teary eyes. Kiran held Snow's hand. I plan to focus on charity in the future at York Traditional Medicine Hall. I support you. Snow held his hand back. 2 people, 2 hearts, thinking as one. Their decision will lift the York family and truly establish a foundation in favor of the public. He who wins the hearts of the people conquers all. Kiran's patriotism and today's decision reflected his true sentiments. Exhaling deeply, Kiran looked at Snow. I'll take you to Lillian Yates' place. Why? Snow asked. Someone is trying to assassinate me. I need to deal with it. Snow suddenly remembered that woman. Is she an assassin? Kiran nodded. Why did you let her go? Releasing her makes it easier to catch her. Kiran's face revealed a meaningful smile. Beep beep. Kiran's phone rang. Lillian Yates was calling. Chapter 759. Kiran answered the call, and Lillian's voice came through first. How did you manage to offend the Warren organization? What's the Warren organization? Are there beautiful women? Kiran asked jokingly as he started the car. There are. Go to sleep with them. Lillian replied irritably. Are they prettier than you? Kiran teased, aiming to close the gap between them. Lillian snapped. Get lost. If they're not as pretty as you, forget it. Kiran felt his relationship with Lillian had grown much closer without realizing it. Because of the love spell and the Joyful Odyssey, their connection had deepened. Watch it. I might tell Snow, Lillian threatened. She's right here listening. Kiran chuckled. You. Lillian was speechless with irritation. To be at Neptune's Cove karaoke soon. You can tell her yourself then, Kiran said. What are you coming here for? Lillian asked, clearly annoyed. To have you help protect Snow, Kiran responded. You think I'm your nanny? Lillian burst out, uncharacteristically irritable. We're all part of the York family, so figure it out. Kiran said, adopting a cheeky tone. Go to hell. Lillian ended the call. She suddenly realized her loss of composure. Where had her usual proud and indifferent self gone? She blushed, knowing Kiran had sensed her feelings, making him bold. Damn, Kiran, if you get cocky, I'll beat you and break your back. Lillian fumed to herself. Kiran sensed this and smirked inwardly. Sister Lillian likes you, Snow said with a smile. I'm not ready to accept that, Kiran confessed to Snow sincerely. Some emotions are like spilled water, hard to gather up. Compared to them, I'm still very fortunate, Snow said, her face radiating happiness. Kiran grasped Snow's hand. The key is that my wife is smart. How am I smart? She asked. A beauty's picture was all it took to lure me in. Stop it. You're still bringing that up. Snow blushed, recalling the photoshopped image. Kiran squeezed her hand. I owe it to that picture. What if I were really that ugly? Snow playfully asked. I wouldn't want you then, Kiran replied honestly. You. Snow was so annoyed she nearly popped a button. Careful, the baby. Kiran gently touched her belly. Snow instantly lost her anger and smiled at Kiran. Are you really pregnant? It's only been a few days. Can't tell yet. It would be nice if it's true, Snow said, her face flushing with happiness. It will be. Kiran felt Snow's true love, and happiness filled his eyes as he softly stroked her belly. Snow also basked in the sweet dream of expecting a child. Both knew they deeply loved each other. When Kiran arrived at Neptune's Cove karaoke, he and Snow went to Lillian's room. Lillian, still in a striking long white dress, her back to them, was as enchanting and seductive as ever. Hearing the door, she didn't turn around. Sister Lillian. Snow playfully stuck out her tongue at Kiran and then approached her. Lillian turned around, looked at them, and said, sit down. Snow pulled Kiran to sit. Lillian's gaze fell on Kiran. The Warren organization is a professional assassination group entirely made up of women. Are there many beauties? Kiran asked deliberately. Lillian suddenly realized that Kiran was becoming increasingly casual with her. Could they be as beautiful as Sister Lillian? Snow glared at Kiran, feigning reprimand. Probably not. Kiran hastily replied. I don't know much about the Warren organization, Lillian admitted, knowing Kiran was trying to get information. Don't you Foxgate have many informants? We only serve Imperial Dragon, defending the nation. We don't involve ourselves in other matters. Lillian paused, then continued. I wouldn't have paid attention to this organization if it weren't for you. Okay, I understand. Kiran turned to Snow. You stay with Lillian. Snow fluttered her eyelashes at Kiran as if to say, you're not calling her Sister Lillian anymore. Kiran raised an eyebrow, already standing up to leave. Kiran, remember to call me Sister Lillian? Lillian reminded him, a bit annoyed. All right. Kiran nodded, turned, and as he reached the door, he called out, Lillian. Lillian, infuriated, exclaimed, Kiran, you? Kiran had already dashed out. That rascal, upsetting Sister Lillian. Snow playfully scolded Kiran's retreating figure. Lillian was helpless to do anything but suppress her anger. Kiran wasn't teasing Lillian. Their relationship had become inseparable. He was also testing the waters since he genuinely needed Lillian's help. After leaving, Kiran drove back to Dragon's Mount, not really concerned about the so-called Warren organization. He had taken measures when releasing the woman in black, leaving a trace of aura on her that made her easy to find. When Kiran arrived at York Traditional Medicine Hall in Dragon's Mount, he found the place swarming with patients. After the upheaval at Bayville Hospital, many had come here. The healing Prince and Frank were treating everyone quite effectively. Kiran looked around and saw many more people arriving, and the outside of the hall was filled with taxis, clearly indicating the patients had traveled from afar. Considering the distance from the city, Kiran began to think about establishing a bus route so they could get to his clinic cheaper. Just then, he saw a mid-sized bus pull up. Kiran was curious as the vehicle stopped, and a group of flamboyantly dressed women disembarked. Kiran immediately focused his mind, remembering the issues with the privileged women from before. These weren't privileged women but patients. However, these patients were peculiar, suffering from a woman's illness. Two words sprang to his mind: sex worker. Seeing many patients already on site, and knowing these women's condition was contagious, Kiran's face shifted subtly with concern, wondering where they had come from. Hi handsome, is this York Traditional Medicine Hall? A heavily made-up woman approached Kiran, her bright red lips parting to ask. The other women, their faces full of joy at discovering Kiran, swarmed around like bees to honey. Kiran initially found these women strange, but now he thought otherwise. Chapter 760. The women carried the same aura he had left on the woman in black, clearly indicating she had sent them. Kiran looked around but didn't spot the woman in black. However, his face bore a cold smirk as he addressed the women unapologetically. If you want medical treatment, line up over there. If you wish to lose your lives, just tell me directly. The women were taken aback, not expecting such a bold statement from Kiran. One of the women flirted, "Handsome, are you trying to play the cool guy?" Another teased, opening her arms, "I'm very accommodating, you know, and I'm available too." Another chimed in, starting to strike a pose. "Choose me, mine are substantial. I'm better." Another boldly moved closer to Kiran. Kiran sneered, thinking to himself, could this Warren organization be from Sunland? Their tactics seemed quite similar to those of Konta Yasuda. Their conversation had already drawn the attention of many patients, who watched curiously. The men trembled slightly, feeling enticed by the women's provocative behavior, while the women quickly looked away, embarrassed. Sofia, from the crowd, seeing these women, became instantly irate, thinking they were companions of the privileged women. She stormed over, "Get lost. Ooh, is the little girl jealous?" One of the women stepped forward, pointing at Kiran and teasing, "Little girl, is this your sweetheart? Looking for trouble?" Sofia, boiling with rage, raised her hand to strike. Kiran quickly grabbed her, stopping her. "What are you doing?" Sofia struggled, unable to break free, and turned to Kiran furiously. The women were invigorated by this, moving closer and saying, "He's taking a fancy to us. Can't you see? You're pretty, but obviously a greenhorn. Never been in bed. No experience. Let me tell you, men like a woman's skills in bed, not just her face. Right? Handsome. Kiran, let me go." Sofia became furious, trying to pull away from his grip. "They all have a woman's disease. Aren't you afraid of getting infected?" Kiran said, pulling Sofia behind him. "A woman's disease?" Sofia recoiled as if she had seen a ghost, stepping back with fear in her eyes. The women paused, obviously not expecting Kiran to notice their condition, their faces turning pale. However, they quickly regained composure, looking at Kiran. "Since you're such a skilled doctor, why not cure us?" "Yes, we really hope to get healthy. If you cure us, we could all keep you company, even together." The women, chattering and giggling, were about to pounce on Kiran. Kiran raised an eyebrow, scanning the women. "I have one word for you now. Get lost, right?" The women weren't offended but started giggling mockingly, playful expressions on their faces. Kiran nodded. "You're not bad at this, quite clever. Handsome, we prefer to roll in the sheets with you. Are you up for it?" The women continued to tease Kiran. Kiran's smirk deepened as he watched them. "You now have 3 minutes to get out of here or face the consequences." "Handsome, didn't expect you to be a 3-minute man. Then let's give it a try." One woman lunged at Kiran. "Ah," she screamed as Kiran grabbed her arm. However, the woman reacted quickly, not out of fear but with laughter, starting to undress herself to seduce Kiran. Kiran smirked, touching a point on the woman's body, giggling. "Ha ha." The woman began to laugh uncontrollably as if being tickled. Kiran let her go, and initially, she stood laughing, then crouched, and eventually started rolling on the ground, laughing. The other women's expressions began to shift, eyes filled with wariness as they looked at Kiran, tense. Kiran looked back at them, wants to continue. The women's faces changed, and they began to back away. Sofia, feeling vindicated, glared at the woman lying on the ground, died laughing. "People come here for treatment, and this is how you treat them." Just then, a woman in a sexy gauze dress approached, with her beautiful sharp face and big dewy eyes. She was stunning. However, her dress, very sexy with her fair skin peeking through, was filled with allure. "Are you her companion?" Kiran asked with a smile. "You talking nonsense," the woman angrily replied, trying to stand up for her. Kiran asked with a smile, then shook his head. "You can't handle it." "What can't I handle?" "Standing up for her won't solve anything," Kiran said. "Is that so?" "But I can suggest something," Kiran offered. "What's that?" "Call the police. Let them handle this." "Police?" The woman's tone turned cold. Yes, if you can't handle it, let the police take care of it, Kiran suggested with a smile. It's none of my business really. I just couldn't stand it, the woman said, deflated after realizing no one else came forward to support her. She didn't know that all the other patients were from Bayville Hospital who had witnessed Kiran's miraculous medical skills and wanted treatment. They were there to get healed, not get involved in such matters, especially when they heard these women had a contagious disease. They were even more afraid. You're not dealing with it? Kiran asked. I'm not, she confirmed. So now it's up to me, right? Kiran asked with a smile. The woman sensed there was more to his words but held back, just watching Kiran. Kiran approached, looking down at the still laughing woman. The woman was now laughing to the point of tears. She was in pain. Laughter was more painful than crying. Had enough fun? Kiran asked blandly. Roman eye. What? It's unbearable. Please forgive me, the woman pleaded in agony. Kiran then turned to the woman who had tried to stand up for her. Do you want to experience it?